Hey all, this is Luke, and welcome back to another episode of Building a Self-Hosted Analytics Service from Scratch. We had to end kind of abruptly last time, as I recall, so we actually have an in-progress commit here we can take a look at and see what we were working on, and get right back into it. Spoiler alert, at least from what I remember, what we were working on was a look back window selection functionality. So we built this thing where we can choose our look back window, and we were enhancing this to support choosing more complex ranges and also start time and end time and some other stuff. And we kind of got distracted and didn't quite finish this up. So let's take a look at this. The other thing that I'll note here is we have a thing to do with the shadcn UI form functionality that basically we need to update our shadcn to use the base UI instead of radix UI or something like that. And there was like a migration path there. So that's another thing we could consider doing. Anyway, let's go ahead and just run our usual scripts. So we can, okay. Weird escape character that I accidentally put in there. All right. So now we should be able to open our app in Chrome. And then once it builds, it always takes a minute to build the first time because we have to build the entire JavaScript bundle. And then log in. Password foobar, set for testing purposes, and now we are here. And this look back thing was the thing we were building. So this is kind of a work in progress. So we kind of need to remind ourselves what the status is, which is part of the reason that I don't really like to leave in the middle of stuff, but yesterday or last time was an unusual case. In any case, we have our look back here. This is what the mockup is. Let's just do add basic lookup. Okay. And this is interesting. Let's go ahead and just do like notes updates. I just want to clean up my working tree here a little bit. And then let's look at what we've got going on, basically. So in our front end, we've got these hooks. And the update here is instead of just passing in the look back as what was previously a number, now we're passing in a start, potentially, an end, potentially, and also a relative, potentially, which is itself actually a duration object. And so in order for that object to fit into the URL, we're formatting it into an ISO string, like gives us something like this. Then on the back end, we need to parse that ISO string. And so if we look at our server, I guess we can clean some of this stuff up. On the back end, we have this functionality here, kind of a lot of lines of code for something that's relatively simple. But basically we're saying if there's a lookback start param, then parse that into a number. If there's an end param, parse that into a number. And if there's a relative param, actually parse that into a duration object using this parse ISO duration function that we defined here. And this parse ISO duration function is something that we wrote kind of right at the very end of the stream. But basically, it takes one of those ISO durations and converts it into a duration object of the datefn's format. And this is one of those weird things about datefns where it doesn't have, it feels like it should have this function. I don't know why this isn't actually just in datefns, but it's not. So we wrote it ourselves. You can convert a duration into an ISO duration, but you can't convert an ISO duration back into a duration object. Anyway, so then we get this lookback state, which is an object with start and relative, and that gets passed into getAllEvents. And if we actually look at getAllEvents here, this function has also been basically rewritten to support two different lookback modes. There's a relative mode, which uses this subtract function from datefns. And then there's also a absolute mode where there's a start and an end. And that just uses, no special logic at all. There's just like the SQL query where start time has to be greater than, which is to say after the start, and less than, which is to say before the end. And I mean, looking at that, I wonder if one of these should be a closed interval. Like, should it be less than or equal to? Look back end. Normally it won't really matter, but let's just do that. That way it's kind of a standard, or no, let's do it like this. That way it's kind of a standard interval where it's closed at the beginning and open at the end. Okay, so great. And then the schema here is just adding this lookback state. So let's go ahead and start committing some of this stuff. Or start staging it anyway, the stuff that's basically done. So all the backend stuff here for setting or, for getting this lookback stuff is pretty much done. And this isn't stored at all in the backend, this lookback information. It's just used as a query parameter when we're getting events. Now on the front end, we've got this hook update, which is great. We've got this state update. So here the look back you can see was previously a number in days, and now it's this more complex state object defaulting to 7 days, which was also what it defaulted to before. And I'm just kind of talking through all this partly so I remember, partly so we can catch any issues. And so that's why we haven't actually written any code yet. It's good to know what you're actually doing before you do it, right? So this state, this is fine. Let's go ahead and commit that. This use events is also fine. This should be pretty much done. So let's commit that too, or stage it for commit. The lookback chooser, the UI, I think is very much not done. And I feel like there's something else to do too, but I don't remember. So let's just focus on this lookback UI here. Okay. So the other thing we need to do probably is fix our app state, because it's based on an old version of the app. And theoretically, if this app had other users, we would need to have a way of actually migrating this state, but we don't need or want that really. So I think I'm just going to delete the app state and refresh the page, and we're going to have to log in again. Okay. So now you see our app state actually has this look back, days 7. That's fine. And we get that listed here in the look back button. And if we were to say click one day, that should work. And if we look at our network here, we should see that that's sending back this relative format with one day as the thing. And what if we do 1 year? Well, that works. And also we actually can see our events, at least in these other dashboards. This one is not happy, invalid date. So we'll have to fix that somehow. Good to know. Okay. And then we kind of need to handle the non-relative duration as well. Now, one thing I want to do actually, so here we have this short duration function. And we actually want to use this probably instead of, in our lookback chooser here, instead of format duration, because it's just going to be better. More concise. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but for now, we're just going to do it as something like this. And this can be renamed short duration interval. And then we're going to have another one that's called short duration, like this. And this one will actually accept a duration. Right? And so here we do this. So now this can accept a duration and it's going to return a short form version of it because I just prefer the short version. It's more concise. And so then to show you an example, now if we look at our date or look back chooser here, if we do short duration here instead of format duration, and we can get rid of that import, get rid of all these imports, okay. Now, you see it has 1y instead of 1 space year. And if you just have the one thing, it doesn't really matter too much, but imagine if it's like 1 year and 1 day or something. It starts to get difficult to read and long, and also it doesn't match with these actual buttons. So now it matches with the button. Great. If we go back to our date thing here, though, now we need to dry this out, right? So at this point, format duration, like we don't actually need to do this. We could just do return short duration, interval 2 duration, blah, 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 right? Oops. And so now this function encapsulates the idea of taking an interval, converting it into a duration, and actually I'm going to call this short interval, right? And this one I'm going to call short interval ms. Sure, why not? And doing that should have automatically updated the imports where those things are called. Because I used the F2 button to rename the symbol in VS Code, it's automatically updated all the call sites as well. A big advantage of using TypeScript as opposed to, you know, if we were in JavaScript. Actually, VS Code works pretty well with plain JavaScript too, but it's not quite as good at doing automatic refactoring, like renaming symbols. Okay, so in any case, we've got our stuff. This hook, you know, this is just renaming that function. Let's go back to the look back chooser now. So we don't need that. So let's handle the absolute case now, right? So in the case that this look back is not relative, what do we want to render? That's a really good question. What do we want to render in this case? Um, Maybe because, so what I'm thinking is if we did the full range, that's going to be kind of long, but maybe we should just do that. And if it's terrible, we can always fix it, right? So here we're going to probably do something like app state dot lookback dot start to app state dot lookback dot end. And these start and ends are going to be numbers or undefined. So we're going to kind of want to do a format. What is it called? Let's look at our data fens library again. Data fens. We would do, one second, I need to blow my nose. Okay. We would do something, right? Format, I guess. Just plain old format. Or format relative? No. I think we want just good old format. So let's figure this out. And let's actually make a helper function for this too. So in our date here, we're going to do something. We're going to export function format timestamp. And the reason we're calling this a timestamp is just to indicate that this is a formatting something that's a snapshot of time, a specific moment, as opposed to, say, formatting a date, which would be like a specific day, but not necessarily a time in that day, or whatever. Anyway, this is just like a timestamp, an instant in time that we want to represent accurately but concisely. And it'll accept timestamp, I guess, which could be number or date or null or undefined. And this will return string or null, let's say. So we would say if timestamp equals null or timestamp equals undefined, return null, right? And this is kind of going to be helpful for rendering because in React, we can just call this function. The actual timestamp may or may not be present, and if it's not, it's just going to return null, which renders as a nothing. Then we can say return format timestamp. And this format is going to be imported from data fens. All right, misspelling, okay. So here we need format string. And this is where, we kind of need to think about how we want this to actually look, right? And really, theoretically, we want something that is like this. Localized date and time, right? And then what is a locale? Well, that's a good question that we will deal with later. In the browser, it should automatically use the right locale, I'm hoping, but not entirely sure. In any case, so here we could do format timestamp. This thing, right? And this we can import. And we can put the same thing here. Makes sense. So then we need to actually handle setting these. And for this, we're kind of going to probably need sort of like a save button. Do we want a save button? So the problem is we kind of have these two dynamically coupled components here, or form inputs here. But let's actually try to go without the save button for now. And we could do let's make a new thing here called update lookback absolute. And this will set relative to undefined. And start and end will be set to something. Start number and number. And we're going to have some edge cases to handle here as well, I think. So let's think about those. So if, let's just go ahead and do this. On change. Well, let's do on change, I guess. Update look back absolute. And we can do the same thing. Well, I guess we'll do it like this. Fine. And what else will we put in here? We need to actually control or track these inputs independently. So let's do const start set start equals use state end set end use state. And for now, we will default these to date.now. Okay. So I think this event should have an event.target.value, which is a string. What is that string? And when we call this update lookback absolute, let's actually just not call that for a moment and just see what we're dealing with here. Okay. Console, click. But this is a bunch of stuff from just me changing things and live reloading. So let's set this to 7 or whatever, just some random time. And what we get is this string. And so then we're going to need to convert that into a date, which we should be able to do with new date of dot target dot value, right? I think that should work. So now if I click on something here, set this to whatever, we do end up with the appropriate actual date there that we would expect to see. Cool. So this date then represents our start date. And what we're going to want to do is compute an end date. I'm kind of thinking through exactly how the state management will work here. We'll just take it one step at a time. We're going to need to compute an end date. And this is going to need to be based on, let's do this, const prev end or current end equals app state dot lookback dot end. And so this is going to be if current end is actually less than start, then we're going to set end to start. And this, I suppose I should wrap in a dot get day date. No, get time. And here we could say current end less than start. Start. Otherwise current end. And let's say if not current end, or current end is less than start, otherwise current end. So this should retain the end unless it's an invalid value for the start, in which case it'll just set it to the same time as the start, right? Does that make sense? And so when we do this update lookback absolute, we're going to give it that start and end. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. Except, of course, this is actually the end date. End. And we would do current start. Update.lookback.start. And start would be not current start, or current start is greater than end, because that's not possible, and otherwise current. Start, right? Kind of confused myself there, but I think this is right. So if there is no current start, or start is greater than end, then we set start to end, otherwise we keep the value. And so we could kind of do this. And maybe we don't actually need these at all. Let's see. Because we can just use the actual app state itself as the source for these form elements. And I hope that will work. So value could be app state dot lookback dot end in this case. And the value here is probably supposed to be a string, but let's just see if this works actually. Okay. So let's refresh this. So we've got our start and end times. If we set this to something, our app state did get updated. That part worked. And you see that the end got updated as well as the start. And now, if we were to say update the start to be, that's 7:41 p.m. If we set start to 6:41 p.m., that gets updated, but the end does not. And if we update the end to, say, an earlier day, they both get updated. So you see what we're doing here to maintain a valid range. Had to ban spam. Okay, so this is good. The problem is that the value of these things is not actually loading into the input. And yeah, so it's complaining about that. So basically we need to convert this into ISO format, right? I think. So if we did like this question mark dot to string, or no, it would be like, this exists, then do new date to ISO string. And we would do, otherwise, this is just going to be undefined. And we would do the same thing down here. And undefined, right? So now, let's refresh this. Why is this not working now? The specified value. So the problem is actually the presence of the time zone, right? So is there a way to not do that? What does that do? Does not work either. I mean, I'm pretty sure the ISO is always going to end in a Z, right? Doesn't that always end in a Z, or am I crazy? Like, can I just do like dot? Can I trim? No, you can't trim specific characters. It's kind of annoying. Let's actually look at the MDN docs. Datetime local. Uh-huh. I wonder if DataFens has a way to do this. Format ISO. Okay. I do not know. We will need to make a function for this. So let's do that. Let's make a function in date. Export function format date for input. Timestamp number or undefined. And this will return a string or undefined, I guess. Doesn't really matter. So here we would say const if not timestamp return undefined. Right. Or we could say if timestamp equals undefined. You might wonder, why am I doing it like this? Why not just do if not timestamp? Well, 0 is falsy in JavaScript. So technically, if a person was trying to set the timestamp exactly to the 0, which is a valid time, this function wouldn't work. Obviously, that's an edge case, but that's why we're not doing the not timestamp thing, if that makes sense. And then here we would do const time string equals this. So then we would say we want to remove the time zone element from the string. So probably we would do like return time string dot replace, and we will replace with an empty string, and we will replace, let's just put something in there so it doesn't look like a comment. So we want to replace something at the end of the string, which I believe we use a $sign for. And what would be being replaced? It would be a Z. And I don't know if it could ever be anything else. But for now, let's just see if this works. And then we need to actually call this function in our lookback chooser. And the nice thing here is we don't even need this conditional anymore. We can just do this. And import this. Right? And then we can do the same thing up here. Cool. Cool. So now if we click on this, we actually have our properly formatted times. The only thing is, they're apparently wrong. So there is a time zone issue going on here, which is interesting. You'll notice, like, if I select, say I select 9:45 p.m., the things up here, they actually were correct for a minute. Like when I click this, that correctly updates. But when I actually deselect it, it stops. It doesn't. So what's probably happening there is kind of a feedback loop mechanism. So I update this. It does update lookback absolute. This changes the state, the app state, and then this also runs because technically the value changed. Now, it might work better if we do it with on input. Let's just see if that works any better. So now if I set this to 345, that isn't a problem. If I set then this to 145 and then 445 and click away. So now this is being held properly. The problem now is it's not being saved in as the right time zone. Why is that? What's that complaining about? I don't know what that's trying to tell me. Whatever. It works, okay? Types, it works. What if I put an exclamation point? Doesn't help. Whatever. Okay. So let's think about this time zone issue. So our app state, like if we look up at this, this is rendering them correctly. And this is format timestamp pp. pp. This one is not formatting them correctly. Format date for input. So this needs to actually maybe use a datafens function. Like if I actually use this format ISO here, I wonder if that will work. Format ISO timestamp. My hypothesis at the moment is that maybe the date fns thing is automatically reading the time zone of the browser, whereas the new date thing is not. Seems like they're not even being populated at all now, though. Oh, see, because that has the -700 thing. So it actually needs to be, this needs to be more complicated. So it could be Z. Hmm. I mean, I guess it's never going to return anything more complicated than what we see there. So it's either going to be minus dd colon dd, or it's going to be plus, or it's going to be a z, right? Is that a crazy assumption? I don't think so. It's complicated though, because it could, like, you could be like, I think it could be like minus, or it could like include a time zone identifier like EST or PST or whatever instead of a number, but I don't think the format ISO is ever going to output that, hopefully. So this should work, right? Should work. Works in my time zone. And now they actually line up. So I could go here, I could click this, I could set this to like, oh, the 21st at 7:55 p.m. And it's going to go to the 30th at 6:47 p.m. Right? And that works. And then if I'm like, actually, I want this to go to the 31st at 7:55 p.m. The other one is also automatically going to be updated. And conversely, if I set this to the 1st, that one's also going to be updated. So this seems to be working pretty well. Let's go ahead and stage our changes so far here. So we didn't need these interim state because we're using the app state. The other thing actually though I want to consider before we get too far is switching between them, right? So currently we've got this. Now what if I click this 1 year button? That sets that to 1 year, but these are still set to whatever they're set to. And that kind of makes me think I might want this to actually be or empty string like that. Because I think that's going to get it to actually like reset itself. Yeah. Like 1 hour. Or I do this. Boom. And then it's like that. Right? And then I do 1 day. Boom. Those go away. That seems good. Now, one other thing is I want these to be maybe like disabled if app state dot lookback dot relative so here's what I'm thinking, like that days equals 1 you could do, but then what if it has other properties in there too? We can't really do this check like that. We need to do like an is equal check. And like I used to pull in Lodash for that, but I feel like there must be some way to do it without Lodash, right? Like MDN or JS compare to objects properties equality. JSON.stringify. I mean, it's still Lodash is equal. I guess that's still the state of the art for doing this in the browser. And I don't want to rely on node-specific functionality because, of course, we are actually potentially doing this in the browser. So let's do this. Lodash is equal. Oop. Is equal. And we could write our own equality comparison is the other thing we could do. And honestly, maybe we could just do that. That'll be fine. Export function is duration is equal. I wonder if data fence has something like this. Hmm. I mean, there's is equal, but that takes strings. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just do it ourselves. Duration is equal d1, duration, d2, duration. Right? So, and let's say duration or null or undefined. Like that. Okay. So if not duration, if not d1 and not d2, return true. They're equal, neither of them exist. If d1 and not d2, return false. And vice versa, also return false, right? So then we're finally left at this case where we have both of these as duration objects. And so then we could say if d1 dot days is not equal to d2 dot days, return. And then we could do the same thing for everything else. Days, weeks, months, years, hours, minutes, seconds, years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, seconds. Yeah, fine. Otherwise, return true. So now we should be able to go into our lookback chooser. And we could say duration is equal. And we can import this. Relative. This, right? So now let's try it. One day, click that. Doesn't seem to be working quite as I expected though. Or is it? Is it disabled? No. What's going on here? Let's just do return true. So now it's disabled. Oh, I forgot to actually fix all of these. That would explain that. Let's fix these. In my head, I was like, I'll do these the second half after I'm done the first half, and then I forgot to do all of those. Okay. Now it should work, right? Yeah. So if I click 1 hour, do I need to refresh this? 1 day, 1 hour, 15 minutes. Oh yeah, I forgot to add the logic to those. Okay. Let's get rid of this because we're just going to get spammed with a ton of console logs. And we just need to copy this disabled variant to all of these buttons. And we could even do a little helper function maybe. Const time relative button. Actually, I don't really want to deal with that at the moment. Just update these. Years 1, months 1, days 7, days 1, days 7, hours 1, minutes 15, months 1, years 1. Great. Okay, so you see how that's working nicely. And then if I pick something here, none of them should be disabled. Yeah, cool. Okay, that's good. And for now, that's going to be sufficient. We will call this, actually, let's make sure that our start time stuff works too. So if I go all the way back to an earlier time, we should be able to actually see the range. And then if I set the end time and go back, it should go away. Okay, cool. Now, how did that happen? That's not supposed to happen though. How is the end time? Hmm. So the problem here is I've got an end time that's earlier than the start time, which is not supposed to be able to happen. Boop. Oh, no, it's not, because the start time's in 2025. Okay. Derp. Okay, it is working fine. Okay. Phew. I scared myself there for a minute. All right, so the other thing we need to figure out now is the invalid date issue here, and that must be something to do with if we actually search for lookback. I feel like there's something that's referencing this app state.lookback that we need to fix. So obviously there's this stuff here. There's this, which is fine. This is a problem. What else is a problem? Nothing in lookback chooser, because that's what we were just working on. Nothing in events, because that is also something we worked on. And this is also fine. Okay, so it's really just this big line chart that's got a problem. So here we're probably going to need to do a kind of a sub thing, I guess. Like start date equals I don't actually remember how this function works, which makes it kind of hard to edit. But what if we did sub new date appstate.lookback.duration or dot relative. Actually, let's flip these around for better sense. And then we actually need to handle this other case, right? Where we're like, if appstate dot lookback dot start, then use that. Otherwise, use this other thing. Like that. And I'm putting an exclamation point here because we know that if start is not set, then relative will be set. And then we kind of need to do the same thing for end date. End, end. And then this would otherwise just be now. Right? And that should work. And then say we set this to 1 year. We should get our data and it should render properly here. And with the right buckets and everything. Great. And say we set this to end time then, and start time then. That also works. Awesome. Okay. Looking good. Looking very good. So we will call this update lookback chooser support relative absolute dates. And that's a good commit to have. There's other things we could do to this lookback chooser, but for now, it's good enough for me. So what else do we want to do here? Let me just check my time here. Okay, we got time. So one other thing I want to think about is updating ShadCN, which I'm really afraid to do this, but I also kind of need to do it. Toast. ShadCN helpers. Huh, what the heck? Oh, that must be like a testing tool. Anyway, I got distracted. This is what I wanted to see. Base UI is the default. I mean, it does say Radix docs are one click away. Now, I tried to figure out where that click is earlier, and I could not find it. Like, do you see it? Is it in the footer? Let's actually go to a page. Badge. Okay, so there's this Radix UI option. But you'll notice that, say, the form, like, so I have this thing called form component, right? And that just doesn't even have a corresponding thing here. I guess I have to click on Radix UI. Maybe that's not actually related to the Radix UI thing at all. Maybe that's something else. Yeah, I see. Okay. It's a different thing. So we probably don't really need to worry about doing that update then. As long as I can actually get to the documentation for the version of what I'm using, I don't really feel the need to update. Okay. What now? Then? Because I was planning on doing that ShadCN migration, but now I don't need to. So what should I do instead? Let's check this off. And I'm going to add something in here that's going to be allow user to specify custom relative windows, e.g. 15 seconds. We can add that later. Okay, so that's fine. What else should we do here? I feel like it might be kind of fun to add server sent events. But there's a bit of complexity there too. I don't know if I'll have time for that. But let's go ahead and get started with server sent events. Um, so what is the idea of server sent events? Well, basically, the idea is we want to be able to send updates to the client whenever we receive new visitors, new analytics events, so that our UI here will dynamically update without us needing to refresh the page. So what do we need to do for that? Well, first of all, we need to create a server-side events or server-sent events function on the server side. Okay. So, oh, one sec. Do you want to? Oh my gosh, these cats, man. Okay. So again here, and you know, I could rethink this from scratch, or I could reuse something that I've already written before, which is what I'm going to do. We're going to go to github.com. Am I logged in? I am not. / Luke Turner / webhook testing tool. And here's another app of mine. And this is much more complicated. And I believe it uses basically the same framework. If we look at our dashboard server.ts, there's this SSE endpoint thing. So let's actually just, wow, this is complicated. This other app, by the way, was heavily AI assisted. So unlike the one that I'm doing on stream, which is why I don't actually know what this function does. But let's just copy it over here and take a look at it and see if we can understand what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, and this we can import, this we can import these types. Type server is not generic. Well, cool. So let's just read through this. So this is creating a stream, a readable stream. And what do we end up doing with the stream? Create new response with the stream. So this is like a bun API, kind of. And this accepts controller. What is the type of this controller? Readable stream. Okay, so that's not our controller. That's the readable stream controller. And that's going to enqueue a data message. And then we need to have some way of triggering these events, which this makes sense. And when one of these events is triggered, we're just enqueuing more messages into this thing. So this seems fine. And so we really only need one of these. We'll call it on event on, yeah, I guess that's fine. On event created. And in this case, the event is going to be a user event. And we're going to send event created, and the payload is going to be the event. Right? Now, one of the things I'm thinking about here is, let's actually look at our hooks for a moment. So okay, there's kind of two options we have when we're thinking about server sent events. One is the option where state is reconciled on the client side. And what I mean by that is we have our events state. We receive a server sent event that says, hey, there's a new user event that was sent. Somebody browsed the page. And we just take that user event and we shove it right into our client side app state. And we're assuming at that point that the client side and the server side are in sync. And if I refresh the page, I won't see any difference. But that's kind of a big assumption. If there's any sort of flaw or exception or whatever, the data can be lost on the client and you've got to refresh it and things like that. And the other thing that can sometimes be concerning is that the order can be out of sync. So if we have anything that's depending on the order of our events, then just sticking this event on the end is potentially not going to be correct. Normally it should be, because it's the most recent event, presumably, because we just got an event notification for it, so it should go in the most recent events. But we don't know that, and so what I'm actually going to do is maybe for now, we will send the event, but on the client side, we will do a full query for the lookback window again to reconcile the event state. It's not efficient, but it's more consistent and guaranteed accurate synchronization of client and server side data. It's also easier to implement usually. So let's just start there and then we can see if we want to adjust it at some point. Anyway, so we could also have an on event updated, might as well. On event updated, because they will be updated, specifically when the user is done, when it's closed, right? Like they leave the page. And that again will just take this event. And these request updated, these we don't need. Okay. Event updated. Created on event created on event updated. So what's the idea here? The idea here is this app events needs to be basically an event emitter, a global event emitter on the server side. And because we're kind of writing this code with the assumption that we're only running a single pod, the client that the analytics tracking script is connecting to, the server, I mean, is the same server that the actual dashboard connection that the user is connecting to is also connecting to. They're both connecting to the same server. So we don't need to go through the database. We can just go through in-app global state to wire up these events. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so, and kind of to take an example here, we import this app events again from here, this DB events. Let's see what that looks like. And we're not necessarily going to copy this. So we've got this event emitter stuff. Do we want to copy this? I don't know what it's trying to accomplish. Let's just try to build our own. So let's actually put it in here, in the server. Might as well. So const export const app events equals new event emitter. This one. I don't know, seems like the same thing. Okay. So now we've got that, right? And these should be off. Might as well just update this now while I'm thinking about it. Right? Great. So then we have this app events thing. And so now we can actually emit our events when things happen. So this is relatively easy to do because we have these standard model functions. And maybe I'll actually put this, I think I'm actually going to put this in the DB module so we don't have any circular dependencies here. Let's put it over here. Actually, let's put it in its own module. Events.ts. I don't know why. I know you can't find event emitter. First of all, this should be server only. Yeah. I just wonder why the autocomplete sometimes doesn't work. Import event emitter from events. Okay. So we could also do like export function emit. Event type string event data key, and maybe this will emit t, and it'll return void. There's nothing really to return, I don't think. And we would do app events dot emit event name. Maybe I should call this event name. Consistency. And then the data. Fairly simple, right? And then I don't know if, I mean, might as well, whatever. Boolean return. I don't know if we really need this function, but I feel like it might come in handy in the future for validation and things like that. So I'm just kind of giving us a standard function here. Then when we look at our actual, well, first of all, let's go down here. We need to import this, right? Then when we go up to our events model here, we actually have these functions that we can use to emit stuff. So like here, we can do like const created event is that, and we will return created event. But before we return it, we'll also do an emit. And maybe I'll add some actual constant types in here too. We'll do export const and then we'll do request updated event. And I know I changed my format in the middle there. Usually in TypeScript, I like to use this format for global constants or shared constants, and the, this format for classes and types. Okay, so that's why I switched it. Anyway, so these we can use for consistency and synchronicity to avoid having to remember this thing. Request created event, right? Just like that. And we could do the same thing for updated event. And here we could say if result return. Well, what if we just do like this? If not result, return null. Otherwise, we're going to do this thing. And this should be const. Like that, right? And those are the only two things that should be creating or updating events. We do also have this clear events, which is interesting. Maybe I'll emit an event for that too, I guess. Emit request cleared event. And just empty object. Okay. And then here we'd also have request cleared. Okay, so that's good. Then, one sec. Okay. Request cleared event. Now we need to import this. Cool. Alrighty, so great. Now back to our server, or really down here. Well, no, that's fine. Let's look at the server. We need to add a handler for our request cleared event. On event cleared. And I can't help but feel like there's some duplication here that I need to get rid of. Like, what if I just did on event and is there a way to have a event emitter listener that listens to all events? I guess I'll use Node.js here. So there's on, right? There's also add listener, which I think does pretty much the same thing. And let's see if we can find something here. I guess in a way we can kind of just do it like I don't know if you can hear that kid. There's a kid throwing a tantrum outside. It's ridiculous. I kind of wonder, like we have these different events, but really we should just have a single event type with a single payload. Like this. And the event name would be event. Doesn't really matter, right? And so then this would be T. And really we could define some events here. So export, well, do we want to do that? Does it really matter? I don't know. Event data type string data T. And we could just call this event. So do you see what we're doing here? We're making this more generic. And so then we can go into, and these, I'm actually going to get rid of, I think. Or maybe I will add a new file here called event constants.ps. Now I'll put those there. Because we want these, I think, on the client and the server. Whereas the actual event emitter, of course, we only want on the actual server. Okay. So now if we actually look at our model here, the way we're going to do this instead is like, actually we can keep that the same, right? So let's think about this. If we do this, we can use this function to convert the type event, and then this will emit type event name data event data, like that. And then in our server, we can just, basically we just want to forward every event, right? And so our data is just going to be json.stringify event, which can be any here. And just say error sending event. Okay, then we don't need any of these other events. Okay, so oh my gosh. Okay, so here we could just say on event, do on event, right? And really, we could probably even have a helper function for this too. Export function listen, handler, void. And then we really don't even need to export that. That could just be like this. And handler. And what is a type of handler? It receives, it's a function that receives data, any, void, let's say. Okay. So then we could say, listen, and I probably should come up with a better name for these, but whatever, on event, right? And then we could say function unlisten. Handler, blah, 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 void, app events dot off, event, and okay. So then down here we could do unlisten or on event. Okay. So that is fine. And then we've got this keep alive thing, which is also just something that AI decided to put in when I was writing that other thing. I think it makes sense, though, to leave that in. Okay, so we've got this SSE endpoint defined now, and I think this should kind of work, but we need to actually plug it in. And let's look back at our other code again to see how we plugged this thing in. SSE endpoint. With auth. So basically we just wrap it in our authentication paradigm and go from there. And we would probably call this like /API users or stream. Let's call it SSE. Oh my gosh. And this, I guess we would have get request right? I mean, I guess we could just do this, right? And then in that actual SSE endpoint, we also should require a user session, of course. Okay. That seems good. So now we need to call this from the client. And again, I kind of want to take a look over here and see how this is called from the client. It's going to make me sign in. Well, I should be able to find this myself. I don't really want to sign in. Oh my gosh, one sec. Let's see. So I think if we look dashboard app.tsx, no. Client, no. Hooks, maybe? Okay, tell you what. I'm going to search for it. I'm going to search for it in my Firefox browser that I am logged in on. Source components SSE provider. This is interesting. Let's actually just kind of use this. So if we add a new component, and then we can add our use SSE hook as well. Or even is that util hooks. Use SSE. Let's copy this. New folder, hooks. Let's just call it hook. Oh, there already is a hooks folder. That makes sense. I thought I had one. And we'll call this use SSE. Okay, so let's just take a look at this. You might say it's kind of cheating to just be copying this from my other project, and it is a little bit, but otherwise we would just be spending a lot of time reading docs and trying to suss out from Stack Overflow and stuff what the best practices are. So this is just saving us some time in that regard, right? So type here is going to be either request created. Let's actually say like request. Well, honestly, we don't really need to worry about this too much at the moment. So let's just say that this is a string. And then there's going to be a data, which is a record. Like that. It's kind of a complicated little bit of code here. But that's fine. Connection state, use ref, use ref. Fine. The main thing we're going to need to think about here is the authentication. So event source doesn't support custom headers. That's kind of annoying because I believe that's how we handle auth in our app, right? Let's inspect foobar network login. If we look over here, headers, I mean, there's the bearer header and the authorization, and that's like the thing, right? we're doing new event source. Let's look at the constructor with credentials. Okay, but how can I... So this is a bit annoying. Oh, here's what I'm thinking. We could put the bearer token into the URL. That's a thing we can do. Usually you don't want to do that because the URLs can be logged and they're not generally considered a good place to put sensitive information, like logged by intermediate proxies and stuff. That's usually not considered a good practice. But it would actually work. Or we could send it as a cookie, which would require us to add the thing as a cookie and do a fair amount of complicated parsing there, which I don't really want to do. I don't really want to do that. Let's start by just putting it in the URL. Or we could actually use WebSockets. Does that work? Can I pass custom headers when opening WebSocket from off? Hmm. Hmm. Well, whatever. So let's do const session equals use session. And let me add some notes here. SSE. Don't send API or token in URL. And we'll also have SSE. Don't requery for all events. Gosh, if I could type. Okay. Just so I don't forget those things. And why is this red? What's red here? Oh, don't need those anymore. Okay. Why is it still red? Oh, I guess I do need those. But they're imported from a different place. That's right. Okay. So here we would say use session. So we get our session here. And we would say like if not session, well, actually, I think we'd want this to be an option. So it would be like auth token string. Or really, we could leave that out entirely. So what's red here? Yeah. Okay. So this actual use SSE thing is called from this SSE provider thing. And we're also going to need const use session equals, or use session. And then we could do, let's do it this way, I guess. Token session dot session dot token. Token string or null. And then we could say if not token return connection state disconnected last event. Just don't do anything. So then down here for the URL, we would need to actually concoct it. Here. Const URL equals, or URL with token equals URL dot search params dot search dot like that, I guess. Dot search dot I think plus equals, right? That's a thing. Or let's do it this way, equals new URL query or URL search params, which will come from URL with token dot search params. As param or URL search params. This. What's this? Dot to string. URL with token. So all of this mumbo jumbo is just to add our actual parameter here without changing anything else about the URL. Dot append session token, or just let's just call it token. Token. Okay. Yeah. So then we need to do something different on our server, actually, for this route. We can't just call require user session. We have to add another option here, which is that. And then we could say like const token value equals this. If that's true, then we would do request dot query request dot what? I don't want params. How do I parse a query string? I guess I do like this. It's annoying. Okay, no, it would be like this. If that's true, then this would be new URL request URL dot search dot get token. Otherwise, or let's do options dot. Otherwise, this business. And then this will be token value. Fine. Okay, so that should technically work. Then down here, when I call this, I need to pass that check token query param true. Okay, so now theoretically that should have hooked up our stuff. And now we just need to define this on event thing. And for now, let's just keep it really simple. And I guess let's type these. On event, query client dot invalidate queries event. Events, this one. It'd be like this. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this would be react.fc react.chill props of children. Let's maybe, I guess I'll just do it like this. And get rid of that. I don't think that's how you do it for functions. I don't remember how you do. Okay. And this is going to be dot dot hooks. Use this to see. Oh, that was weird. Okay. And token. Stringer undefined, I guess. Fine. Fine. Okay. So I think that might actually be everything we need. Kind of. We need some more UI elements around this, probably to tell when we're connected or not. But let's just see what happens here. Oh, I also need to put this in my component tree. It needs to be inside the query client and session provider. So in here, we would have our SSE provider. Like that. Failed to construct URL, invalid URL. Awesome. What does that mean? I mean, I can kind of guess, right? That it's something to do with this. If I just comment all that out and do URL, it works, but A, we get a 404 because I forgot to update the actual URL. It should be API FSC. So now we should get a 401. And then what's wrong with my weird logic here? New URL. That should be fine. Well, is it fine? What if I just take that all out? Doesn't work because it's not an absolute URL, presumably. Right? Copy. Constructor. absolute or relative reference to a base URL. If it's a relative reference, base is required. So I guess we could do location dot look, or just location dot ref. All right. So now we get this. That works. And then we need to do this. And now we get this, and that works, and it returns a 200, and that's great. So then we get connected. So then if we send some test data here, so let's open a new tab, or we don't need to. We can just go to our demo site, which I believe is localhost 8000. Localhost 8000. And then we can see we get these events. And if we say, let's do 15 minutes, look back, it still says 0 on everything. If I refresh, oh, if I switch to localhost, okay, so now that's doing a thing. If I go over here, refresh, now this says 2. You see? Maybe it'll be more obvious even if I put this up in a new tab here. Let's go over here, refresh. And you see that number, this number here is increasing each time I refresh because the SSE event is going to the client, which is what we want to see. So that's pretty good. There's some improvements we could make there. I will actually add another note here. SSE connection status indication in UI. Those are all things we want to add. But for now, I think I'm going to call it here. Let's just make sure we're not committing anything too weird. So SSE provider is this thing. The use SSE hook. We don't really know fully how this works, but we copied it from another app where it does work. This stuff, the server side for the SSE is actually pretty simple. Yeah, okay. And we will call this add SSE connection. Cool. Okay, with that, I'm going to push my changes. Okay, and then that's going to be it for the day. Thank you all for joining in, and I will see you next time.